You're on.
Okay, hang on.
Hey everybody,
1
it's
minute.
Lisa,
We're
Quilting
on-
in the
we're
Valley.
on
So
the
we are
other
going to start
side. We
Quilting
can't focus
101. We're going to make sure that everybody has the tools that they need to be successful with making a quilt. So we have a couple of different groupings
Turn you
here.
down. Hang
So
on.
this is kind of
I'm gonna
the
turn you down.
beginning. This is kind of the entry level stuff. And this is kind of the top of the top. This is the good stuff. So let's talk about what's in both of our bundles. First of all, you need to have a really good ruler. There are 2 rulers on the market right now that are non-slip. You've got your creative grids.
Okay, how do
Your
I stop
creative
it?
grids has got a coating on the back,
Okay, I
these
did.
little circles that are on the back. Kind of grip your fabric. It does pretty well. It does better than Olfa, Olipfa. What are the other ones out there? The ones with the yellow lines on them, I can't remember. Anyway, it does better than those because they don't have anything on the back of them to make it non-slip. So this is a good one. What is a better one is the Quilter
you're on
Select
the video,
rulers.
is it gonna
The
come on
Quilter
the-
Select rulers is completely coated with a kind of tacky thing on the back. So it will not move at all. As a matter of fact, when you push this on your cutting board, your fabric will move before your ruler will move.
Yes,
So
okay.
this one,
It's down
you
all
make
the way to
fewer mistakes, you lose
It's all-
less fabric, you are more accurate with your cutting in this
Okay.
ruler, and even to some extent with this ruler than you are with some of the inexpensive rulers that you're going to see online.
Oh, gotcha.
So those are our 2 choices for rulers. Pressing. You want to make sure that you have a really good pressing solution. Keep in mind I said pressing, not ironing. So we're not going to iron. Ironing is this. Pressing is, so you need to learn to press, not iron. Ironing will stretch and move your seams and pull things out of alignment, particularly if you're working with bias edges. Bias means the weave goes like this. On bias edges, your cut's like this, so you have open pieces up here, so it'll stretch badly. It stretches less this way than it does this way. So if you're ironing on a bias edge, you're going to get all kind of wavity stuff and stretch out. You're going to press. So our pressing solutions are, we're using wool mats. This is a very inexpensive wool mat. This is all at 20 bucks.
So what do I hit now?
It's the right thickness. When you're looking at your wool mats, you can find some cheap ones online.
Maybe I'll go out here.
Make sure you're looking at one that's a full ½ inch thick. Anything thinner than that, and you're just going to get the bottom surface underneath wet. It's not going to help you press. The full ½ inch thickness is what you need to hold the heat and to reflect the heat and the moisture back up into your quilt so that you're getting your seams really nice and flat. So the heat, you don't use steam, you don't use best press, you don't use anything with a wool mat. The heat and the moisture in the air are inside the mat, reflecting back up to the heat that you're putting on the top, and you get a really nice flat seam with a wool mat. On the other hand, here we have on this side, we have our bigger, nicer wool mat. So this one's 20 bucks. That is a nice little deal to have at your table to do piecing while you're piecing. You can have it right at your sewing table. This one is, I believe it's $57, $58. This one is the Quilter's Pressing Fleece. Again, it's a nice thick mat, bonded. This one's 12 by 18, and it also comes in its own storage bag. One of the things people don't think about when they're thinking about purchasing a wool mat is wool, moths. This will keep the moths out of your wool pressing mat, and it comes with it. So like I said, this is 58 bucks, I believe. Okay, so we got a good ruler. Speaking of which, you're going to use a ruler on a mat. So you need to find a mat. Don't get those plastic mats that they make to go on top of the craft tables. Those plastic mats will just chew through your rotary blades. You will have a dull rotary blade, and rotary blades can add up pretty quick if you're ruining them on one of those plastic mats. Make sure you're purchasing a self-healing rotary cutting mat. You can find them all over the place. There are only 1 or 2 brands really that are true to measurements. So when you're cutting and measuring for your quilting, you always measure with your ruler. You never measure with your mat. If you are fortunate enough to purchase a Martelli mat, those tend to be very true to the measurements. So you can take your ruler and put it up against a Martelli mat, and it is most likely going to reflect accurate measurements. Some of the other ones that you're going to find at different places, that is not the case. Additionally, the quality of your mat is going to make a difference into its longevity. So the really thin, brittle mats will warp in heat. So if you have the misfortune of getting your iron somewhere near your mat, it'll go and then be impossible to cut on. If you have the misfortune of storing it in the sun or having it in the back of your car when it's hot, it'll warp and then you've lost it. So there's only a couple of mats. Again, Martelli is one of them. You can roll a Martelli up, stick it in a box in a big tube, mail it in the heat, and then unroll it, and it's fine. So Martelli does make a good mat. They do. They do. They do. The AccuQuilt mats actually are pretty nice as well. So an AccuQuilt mat can be mishandled a little bit. Not quite as well as a Martelli, but pretty good. Okay, so we have our pressing solution, not ironing, pressing solution. We have our wool mat. Over here, we're looking at the Panasonic cordless freestyle iron. So this is my personal iron, or actually this is a classroom iron, but I have one of these at home. So this is a cordless iron. This plugs into the base and recharges while you're using it. It gets hot very quickly. It is pointed at both ends, so when you're nudging apart your seam allowances, you don't go back over them with that fat end and wipe out everything you just did with your pressing. So this is $129. I've had mine at home for 6 years. This has been our classroom iron for 5 years, here at the shop, 5.5 years. So these are good irons. This has got stuff on it, it's dirty, but that just tells you it's been well used. Okay, at home, I have an ironing board. Just an ironing board, not a wool pressing mat. I use the wool pressing mat here, but at home, I don't have a wool pressing mat, I have an ironing board. So I use Best Press. Best Press is a starch alternative. A starch alternative in conjunction with your hot iron, no steam, will make nice flat seams, almost as nice as using the wool mat. Almost as nice, not quite, but almost as nice. So if you want to use, and Best Press has the added advantage of smelling good on top of it. It is not starch, and the good thing about it not being starch is that it will not attract silverfish. Starch is a food for bugs. Silverfish love starch. So if you store your completed quilts in a closet somewhere and you got a little bit of dampness in that closet, you will find silverfish in your quilts, because if you use regular starch, because they're attracted to it, it's a food item for them. So if you use Best Press, there's less food for the bugs. If you're going to use Best Press, this guy will save you a lot of Best Press. So this is, basically it was designed for the hairdressing industry. This guy sucks up the Best Press and turns it into a very fine mist. So instead of going all over your quilt, and then you got wet spots and you have to dry them, this turns it into a really super fine mist, and it covers the whole surface, which makes it quicker to dry and makes it easier to iron, and you don't have blotchy spots, wet spots. Okay, so we have our 3 pressing solutions, whichever one you want to choose. We have a couple of different options for rulers. You want to make sure you have a ruler. What are you using with your ruler? You're using a rotary cutter. So these are our 2 nicest rotary cutters. We use these in the shop all the time. The price is not exorbitant on either one of them. This is $18.99. It has a lock that will keep the guard in place. When you use it, left-handed or right-handed, you just unlock it, and then every time you press down, this plastic guard goes out of the way and you can cut. So that is very nice. This one, we have these at the batting bar and I think on the second cutting table. This one we keep at the first cutting table. This is a trigger one. So the guard is on here. The way to get the guard out, you have to pick it up, pull the trigger, and that will expose the blade to cut with. This one is $34.99. Between the two, I am probably more comfortable with this one because it feels better in my hand. This is more, I guess, ergonomic because of that curved shape, so it feels better in my hand. This one is a straight shaft, and it doesn't feel quite as nice. So this one, $34.99. The blade that we're using in those, rotary cutting blades are not going to kill you in cost. If you've got a bad rotary cutting blade, for crying out loud, replace it. Just replace it. It'll make your life so much easier. So if you are having to push and bear down to cut your fabric, you need a new blade. So the blades that we're using in here pretty much exclusively at this point are the Olfa Endurance blades. It's a new blade. It was introduced last year. These last about twice as long as a regular rotary cutting blade, unless you hit a pin. If you hit a pin, you're out of luck. But if you don't hit a pin, these are really sharp, really nice blades, and they will last you a nice long time. They're $15 for the blade. Like I said, it lasts at least twice as long as a regular blade. So there's that. Scissors. You got to have some scissors. When you're looking at your options in scissors, and we carry a couple of different options, dressmaking shears, while they're nice to have, are too long and unwieldy for quilting use. So if you've got a pair of dressmaking shears, that's nice. Keep them for dressmaking. You're not going to use them very much for quilt making. For quilt making, you need shorter blades and these Microtex blades, which both of these are. So these are Fisker's Microtex. These are Karen K. Buckley's Perfect Scissors. These come in 3 different sizes. None of them as big as dressmaking shears. Primarily, you're going to be using blades about like that when you're quilting, because what you're using your scissors for is cutting threads, cutting off dog ears. Dog ears is what happens when you put 2 triangles together and you get the 2 points sticking out on opposite ends. So that's primarily what you're going to be cutting. You're not going to be cutting fabric apart with your scissors. You're going to be cutting, trimming little pieces, cutting out appliques. What else? Threads, trimming, that kind of thing is what you're going to be doing with your scissors. So you need something light and easy to use. Another thing, if you're just going to have by your sewing machine, these are nice for trimming off your threads at your sewing machine. If your machine does not have an automatic thread cutter, these are nice to have. So the Fiskers are $19.99. These are the titanium coated. They'll last forever. They're Microtex. And they have a spring in the handle, which makes it easier on your hands. These are the Karen K. Buckley. They have much nicer handles. Your fingers fit inside of them. They are Microtex as well, and they also come with a blade cover. These are $27.99. These are the mediums. And then this little guy, these little squizzers, as we like to call them, I believe these are $8. All right? Pins. You need pins. So there's a couple of different kinds of pins, and there's a price discrepancy between them. So these are Dritz. These are 250 extra fine glass head pins. So this version of extra fine versus the Clover version of extra fine is 2 different animals. So these are quilting pins, fine quilting pins. These are, I believe, $9.99 for 100. These are $9.99 for 250. When you go to pin your pieces together, these go in much easier and leave smaller holes. You have to kind of push with these. So they say they're fine. You can tell by looking at them that they're not as fine as these. So pins count too. Get things that are going to make your life easier, things that are easier to use. So don't just walk over to the pin selection and grab some pins and go, okay, I got pins. Look at them and see what the diameter of the pins are. They'll say right there. These say 0.5 millimeter. These say 35 millimeter. That's a difference. These are 3.5 millimeter. These are 48 millimeters long. These are 35 millimeters long. So these are longer as well. So look at what you're trying to get and make sure that they are the finest, thinnest pins you can get. That'll make it much easier for quilting. You're not working with corduroy. You're not working with, wool. You're working with quilting cotton. So you need a very fine pin that's not going to punch big holes, and you're going to be able to easily pull in and out without distorting your fabric. And look for a pin that's long enough for you to be able to navigate the different things you're going to want to use it for. Okay, thread. We recommend Aurifil thread. If you've got Coats and Clark's all-purpose thread, put it away and use it the next time you make a skirt. It is not good for your quilting. It's a thicker thread, it throws off a ton of dust and lint, and your seams will not lay as flat as they will if you use an Aurifil thread. So we are an Aura dealer. We're actually an Aurifil Platinum dealer. That's the highest rank you can get because we are all in for Aurifil. Aurifil is long staple Egyptian cotton. It is made in Italy. Long staple means that the parts that they put together to make the thread are longer, so they take less of them. So, for example, if I have to make an inch of thread and I'm using 50 different pieces because they're all short pieces, think about the thickness that's going to make versus if I have to use 20 different pieces to make an inch of thread. Much finer thread. Additionally, before Aurifil is spooled, it is actually run from the hank through an open flame before they spool it, and it burns the lint off. So you get very, very little lint with Aurifil, and it's a very fine silk finish. Your seams will lay really flat. Why do you want your seams to lay flat? If you are piecing something that, say, is this wide across, and let's say you have 10 intersections, seams going across it, and let's say you're off 1/8 of an inch, that's not much, 1/8 of an inch, so that's only 1/16 of an inch on each side, which is really not much. If you're off 1/8 of an inch times 10 seams, that is 1.25 inches your end piece is going to be off by. And then your borders won't fit. So it makes a huge difference that your seams lay flat, that you cut accurately to begin with, that you have a 1/4 inch seam, true 1/4 inch seam, not a scant, a true 1/4 inch seam, and you're using good quality fine thread that will lay flat, and you're pressing, not ironing. A lot of information. Okay. The next thing you're going to talk about is making sure you have the right needles. So these are for piecing. Do not use your universal needles for piecing. These needles will make all the difference in your piecing. These are Microtex needles. The difference between a Microtex needle and a universal needle is the tip. So if you can see the tip of this is kind of rounded, that would be a universal needle. The tip of a Microtex needle is as pointy as it can be. Sheer point, very pointy. And if you could see the end of these needles, you would know what I was talking about. They are very, very pointy. Why does that make a difference? Well, when you are going through quilting cotton, which is a thinner, finer weave cotton, a very pointy needle will punch right between the threads on that fabric, whereas a universal needle is going to punch holes right in that same fabric. And it'll make a louder noise, it'll pull in your seam, and you'll have trouble getting your seam allowance at a 1/4 inch. Use a Microtex needle. Use the Microtex needle that is sized for the thread that you are using. So an Aurifil 50 weight thread, which is the type of thread you want to use for piecing, it has an orange spool. You know it's 50 weight if it has an orange spool. A 50 weight Aurifil is going to be used with a 70-10 or a 75-11 or possibly an 80-12 needle. Don't use it with a 90-14. That needle is way too big. So the hole in a 90-14, the eye, is huge, and Aurifil just rattles around in there. You'll get shredded thread. So you want to use a Microtex needle, and you want to use it in the size that matches your thread. If you're using some different type of thread, you probably want to call us and ask us what kind of needle you're going to use, or we have a book on our web store called Know Your Needles that'll tell you all about the different sizes of needles and threads. That you might want to look into as well. Okay. What else might you need? Marking pens and pencils. So these are friction pens. Friction pens are heat erase pens. They're made by Pilot. They come in different kinds. These are a ballpoint and these are a gel point. So, not that that matters too awful much. This one is finer. So, there's all kinds of stuff going on all over the place about don't use friction pens because the marks will come back when your quilt gets below freezing. I don't store my quilts in the freezer. I don't leave my quilts in the back of my trunk all winter. And if I did, I would just take them inside and I would iron them again and poof, the marks would be gone. Barring that, you can take the marks off with these pins by washing them with soap. Just soap. So you don't have to have any special ink remover, just use soap. But you are going to use some type of marking pen at some point when you're quilting. These friction pens are a very fine line, so that if you're marking a stitching line, which you will do in part of our Skill Builders quilt, if you're taking part in that, a very fine line is much easier to sew accurately on than a fat line made by chalk. Additionally, when you're using chalk marking, the vibration of your sewing machine sometimes will actually vibrate the chalk right off the top of your quilt sandwich. You won't be able to see it anymore. So we use friction, and we don't have any issues with them. I have used friction pens for 20 years and have never had any issues with them. Okay. Another thing that is helpful to have is a stiletto. What is a stiletto? Other than a stiletto, this one in particular, it's got a silicone tip on it with a flat bottom, and you can use this to guide your pieces right underneath the foot as you're sewing. So you know when you're, well, you may not know, but if you're sewing triangles together and you're getting to the end of them, sometimes the points go like this when you get to the end, and you kind of need to hold those together right up until they get to the needle. That's what this is good for. And it keeps your fingers out from underneath the needle. So I do use a stiletto regularly. I use a stiletto when I am piecing curves. So if you're piecing curves, you're going to want to have a stiletto. What else you need? When you get to quilting your sandwich, so actually doing the top stitching. So there's piecing, that's putting everything together for the top, and then there's quilting, which is the top stitching, holding your layers together. When you are quilting, you want to use a quilting needle. What's the difference between a Microtex or a universal and a quilting needle? A Microtex and a universal needle have an eye that is like this. It's designed to go forward and back. A quilting needle has an eye that's designed like this. It lets you go in multiple directions. So if you're doing, say, a meander, or you're doing a circle or whatever, go like this too often with a Microtex, which has an eye like this, and you're going to shred the thread. Use a quilting needle. It has lots of room to move around as you're going this way, this way, and the other way. So you do need to have different needles, and you need to track which one is in your machine. Which leads me to your sewing machine. Make sure you have a sewing machine that works. Some of the very vintage machines are workhorses. Bring them in to your local tech person, have them gone over, and they'll probably last a long time, but you got to take care of them. So you have to oil them. You have to make sure that they have the right needles in them, and you have to make sure they have the right thread in them. Nothing wrong with a vintage machine. Some of the newer machines that they sell at some of the big box stores, you can tell how long they're going to last by looking at the warranty on the box. Look at the warranty. That tells you what you're getting for your money. So if you are getting into quilting and you're just dipping your toe into it, would I recommend that you buy a $200-300 throwaway machine from Walmart? I would not. A, you get no training from Walmart. B, when your machine, something goes down with it, you're not going to take it to Walmart and they're not going to fix it. So, and C, you're not going to get life out of it. So even if you decide you don't like to quilt and you don't want to make any more quilts, if you get yourself a decent basic machine, you'll have it to do hems, you'll have it to repair rips, you'll have it to do some home deck or whatever kind of craft that you decide to do in the future. Get a decent machine. You don't have to buy a $6,000 machine to start quilting, but get a decent one. So we've got machines that start in here that have 20-year warranties on them, and they start at $750. Yes, that's twice what you're going to spend at Walmart. However, you're going to get something that's going to last quite literally 5 times as long as what you get at Walmart. So, word to the wise. 1/4 inch feet. You need a 1/4 inch foot for your sewing machine. Can you get a 1/4 inch seam by guessing? Can you get it by making a mark on your zigzag foot and putting stuff on the throat of your machine? You can get close to it. Can you be consistent that way? Probably not. You really need a 1/4 inch seam. So get yourself a 1/4 inch foot. They make a 1/4 inch foot for quite literally every sewing machine on the market. I can even get them. I can get generic sewing machine feet that work on all kinds of different sewing machines. So if you need a 1/4 inch foot and don't know where to get one, give us a call. We'll find one for you. I think that's it. Good sewing machine, good needle, good thread, 1/4 inch foot. When you get to the quilting, you're going to want a walking foot because we're going to do stitch in the ditch for this quilt that we're going to do. Good pressing solution, not ironing. Good cutting materials. Good, accurate, non-slip cutting materials. Decent scissors that are going to grip your fabric and be good for the purpose you're using them for. Good pins. You don't have to have the best on the market, but good ones. Get good ones. You don't want to have stuff working against you while you're trying to make your first quilt. It's not fun if you're working against your tools. Okay, that is our first start on the stuff you want to start looking around and finding, stuff you want to make sure you have to start this journey. If you have been quilting for a while and you really haven't taken a hard look at the tools that you have in your toolbox, maybe get everything you have out, take a look, and make sure you're using the best things to get the best results and make it the most fun. Otherwise, it's a chore. Why do you want to do quilting as a hobby if it's a chore? That's bad. Okay, it's Lisa with Quilting in the Valley. We're signing off. We'll have Quilting 101 cutting next time. See ya.